Well, the minister responsible for the NDIS, Mitch, says early data has revealed cost blowouts of up to 30%. He's speaking now with our political reporter, Clarke in Canberra.
Thanks, Kim. And Mitch Fifield, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the government wants to make the NDIS more cost-effective. How do you do that?
Well, I would hope that all political parties want the NDIS to be as cost-effective as possible. The alternative to that is that it's cost-ineffective. The NDIS is something that Australians with disability have waited for a long time. They deserve a better deal, and what we want to make sure is that as much of the money that's allocated for the scheme as possible gets to those people who need the support.
So where are the areas that you would change to make it more cost-effective? Where are the problem areas?
Well, we've had one quarter of the NDIS launch sites so far. What we've found in the launch site quarterly results is that average package costs are about 30% higher than anticipated, and it's taking twice as long to get people through the process and to set them up in the scheme. So we have asked with other Australian governments through the COAG process for the NDIS agency to report for the next meeting of COAG as to what some of the cost drivers might be and what other things can be done to improve the implementation of the scheme. And I think it's important to recognise that this is something that all Australian governments asked for at the COAG meeting last week. All First Ministers asked for this work to occur, and this morning I was chairing the COAG Ministerial Council on the NDIS, and we've been tasked with providing that information for the next meeting of COAG.
And certainly that will be critical, because if that finding of what the costs are behind this 30% higher than anticipated costs are, if that's something like overheads or administration or problems with the processes, that you might be able to change. But if it's just that the calculations that were made in trying to forecast these costs are wrong, and to deliver what disabled people under this scheme actually need just costs more than anticipated, what do you do then? Do you stick with the same funding envelope, or do you accept that perhaps the initial costs were underestimated and that you need to spend more to meet the needs?
Well, it's important that we have the work done to understand why it is that average package costs are higher than anticipated. Once we've received that work, which will be provided to the next meeting of COAG, we'll be in a position to see what steps need to be taken. But it's important to be crystal clear that the government is absolutely committed to delivering the NDIS in full, and we're committed to honouring the funding envelope. And I just think it's really disappointing that while I was chairing the Ministerial Council meeting this morning, Bill Shorten and Jenny Macklin were out and about seeking to scaremonger, while I was actually sitting down with ministers getting on with the job of implementing the NDIS. The Labor Party could not resist the temptation to try and make this a partisan issue, to try and scare people with disabilities. That should not be the approach. We should work through this together.
Mitch Fifield, there is concern from some in the disability sector, though, that yesterday we had the budget update where we had both the Treasurer and the Finance Minister putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that the budget is in a poor state and that savings need to be made, and in the same breath talking about having cost efficiencies in the National Disability Insurance Scheme. You can see why people are concerned that 2 and 2 might equal 4, and that if there is if the government is looking for cost savings and warning that everyone needs to be ensuring that they're doing their bit to help the budget bottom line return to surplus, you can understand why they might fear that that might mean either some people might miss out or not be eligible, or that the rollout might be delayed.
Well, I can understand people with disability being concerned when Bill Shorten and Jenny Macklin spend all of today and last night try to cause fear, try to cause concern. The point that the Treasurer made yesterday was that we want this NDIS to be as efficient as it possibly can, and what that means is ensuring that taxpayers get value for money, but also that the people that the scheme will support get the maximum value of each dollar that's available. That's what we're talking about. We're committed to delivering the scheme. We're committed to the funding envelope. We just want to make sure that the scheme is the best that it can possibly be.
What about the time frame? You say you're committed to the scheme and the funding envelope. Are you still committed to having it fully rolled out by 2019?
Well, the timeframe is something that is embedded in the bilateral agreements between the Commonwealth and the jurisdictions. We said that we will honour those bilateral agreements, and we're in the process of implementing them as we speak, which was part of the purpose of the Ministerial Council meeting this morning that I chaired. So this is a shared venture of all jurisdictions. This isn't just a Commonwealth project. This is something that all Australian governments have committed to do and to deliver. And today I was working with Labor ministers and Greens ministers about how to implement the NDIS, and First Ministers at COAG last week restated their commitment for the full delivery of the NDIS, but they did what you would expect them to do once you've got the first quarter's results. They asked some questions. They've asked for my Ministerial Council and the NDIS agency to come back with advice as to why the figures are trending as they are. We'll do that work, we'll report back, and we will work collectively with all governments to make the NDIS a reality.
And in this meeting, obviously, you're getting information from those ministers in states that are hosting the trials, and the trials, each trial site is different in the way it's being formulated. Is it too early to say yet, or do you have any indications of perhaps whether one system is working better than another, or perhaps there are some advantages to some trials over the others that you have been able to gauge at this early stage?
Well, the four trial sites which have commenced in Geelong, the Hunter Valley, Tasmania and South Australia are all following the same model. The only difference between the launch sites is that the Hunter Valley and Geelong are comprehensive sites covering all age cohorts. Tasmania and South Australia are focusing on particular youth cohorts. But the whole purpose of the trial sites, the launch sites, is to learn lessons, is to test and to take those lessons and learn from them before the scheme is fully rolled out. That was always the intention of the trial sites. I know some in the opposition are getting a little excited about the fact that we're referred to the launch sites as trial sites, but we're doing that to emphasise that there are lessons to be learnt. That's the whole purpose of these sites. We're determined to learn them so that we can make any necessary adjustments before the scheme is rolled out in full.
And Mitch Fifield, just very briefly before we let you go, one of your former colleagues, Sophie Mirabella, has been appointed to the board of the Australian Submarine Corporation. Is she the right person for the job, or is this a case of jobs for the mates, as we often see when governments change?
No, she's absolutely the right person for the job. She was the shadow for industry for a long time. The Australian Submarine Corporation is a significant industrial venture. She's got a first-class mind, and it's an appointment made purely on the basis of merit.
Mitch Fifield, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Melissa.